Thank you, Carolina. I believe what you just said is all true in Russian. I have no idea. Yeah, so thanks, first of all, Carolina, for having me. I've known you for quite some time, and it's pretty cool what you've set up here. So the topic of today is mobile measurement 2.0, what it really means. I'm Fabian. I'm running the sales operations for Adjust in the EMEA region. And I'm here today to speak about this, trying to explain a little bit what attribution is, but I guess most of you know quite well what it is, and more focusing on what has really changed over the last time, and what we think advertisers need to be aware of and what they need to focus on in order to really make full benefit of attribution providers as well as data and analytics. Just maybe some words about Adjust. Adjust is around 5 years old, one of the early players of the attribution space, basically founded to give advertisers a little bit more transparency in the whole digital mobile ecosystem. We are around 160 people now across the world, and we handle about 2 petabytes of data each month. So our clients generate a lot of data, and we really want to enable them to make the most out of it. So just a very short introduction of the mobile ecosystem. I mean, it's very fragmented, it's very complicated. There are multiple players. If you wanted to run campaigns in various networks, you would have to integrate multiple SDKs, you have to consolidate multiple reportings. You sometimes even need to pay double for one install because 2 networks are claiming for the same install. And that was really the reason why Adjust was founded. And then there's this famous quote of John Wanamaker, one of the revolutionists of the old advertising industry, who says, half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half it is. So yeah, attribution players are in the market really to give the idea and more feedback around the campaigns that are running, and to really trying to find out what makes a lot of sense. In 2017, according to Gartner, there's around 270 billion downloads, and I guess this is quite overwhelming, and around 77 billion in app revenue. And there's a lot of fraud too, and this is one of the main topics I want to focus on, trying to explain a little bit more about the topic of fraud, what kind of fraud there is, and what you guys should be looking out for. Yeah, so what are we up against, and who do we fight for? Who is to blame? That's the big question about fraud, and if you're not even aware of it, then you don't have any idea. But I guess there are multiple ways of tackling it. It would be very easy. So first of all, what is fraud? We define fraud as when there is an ad publisher that is claiming a conversion that doesn't exist, or when an ad publisher is claiming an install that hasn't even happened, or when they claim an install which they haven't contributed to. And it would be very easy to always blame the networks for it, but it's not as simple, because the networks sometimes don't even know what kind of publishers have connected to the network. So it's really the publishers, the individual publishers, which contribute a lot of fraud to the industry. Looking at some data that we've checked out is that we have games especially focused for fraudsters, because the engagement of the people, of the gamers are really high, and sometimes gamers just want to get to the next level and they don't really focus on stuff they're actually doing in the app. And it's twice the amount of fraud, of risk of fraud in games than in any other vertical, followed by lifestyle shopping and some other ones. And what kind of fraud do we actually have? We have fake installs. That is actually when servers are pretending to be apps and communicating with analytics SDKs and just faking traffic and pretending to be installs. Then we have simulated devices, click spam and preloading, and that's the more sophisticated stuff, but let's talk about this in more detail. So faking HTTP calls is a pretty common way of fraud. It can be tackled very easily, but if you're not aware of it, once again, you are looking at servers that are simply telling the analytics SDKs or the networks SDKs that the install just happened, but it actually did not happen. So it's basically happening by sniffing out some codes, trying to use this API to create these installs, and it's something a lot of people are not aware of. And what are the effects? So effects are that publishers are paid for fake installs. SDKs are collecting too many or counting too many installs, and retention rates are very low. And how do we fight it? It's pretty easy, and I would say attribution providers should definitely have this in place. It's an analytics SDK, obviously, with an SSL encryption, and it's a shared secret. So the shared secret is something that you set up at the very beginning of working with an attribution SDK. It's an app token, for example, that only you and your attribution provider is actually knowing. So nobody can ever hack that. You are not supposed to share this at all, and then you're pretty safe for this type of fraud, at least. Simulated installs and simulated behavior. This is a little bit more complicated, but it's also something that attribution providers should be able to tackle and should be able to help you, because it will make a lot of damage if they don't help you. So what is it really? There's either simulated devices that are really simulated, so they don't exist. It's just like an OS stack that is simulated, but also there are mechanical Turks. There's this famous picture, and it looks funny, but I'm sure it actually exists. This happens mostly in countries where the payment is pretty low, and where you can actually afford to have someone sit there and trigger multiple devices and download from all of these devices, actually. And it would help you at all, because I mean, this girl won't be able to play with all your apps or spend money in all your apps. So this is really happening. So the effect here is really that these installs are being simulated, and most of the time, I just said it, this happens in countries where the payment rate is pretty low, and where the CPI payout is also very low. People are sending these installs via a VPN or a data center through to another country, and countries like Japan, US, countries in Europe are mostly the target for it, so we are right in the middle here. What happens is that they are sending it through a VPN data center, and you're actually buying installs if you're focusing on Russia, and these installs are coming from Asia. You think you get these installs from Russia, but they're actually channeled through from Asia to Russia, which sucks because you want to have users in Russia. And also the retention rates are really low. What the solution for this is that you actually really have to look at the data once again. You need to look at IP addresses. For example, fixed IP addresses don't make any sense for installs, because mobile phones, you want installs from mobile phones, and mobile phones have constantly changing IP addresses. What you also want to look at is that your attribution provider is really listing or blacklisting IP addresses from data centers. There are different kinds of services that do that service, where you can reject installs coming from a certain IP address, and the IP address from data centers is pretty, let's say, suspicious, because why would there anyone be and download in a data center from a fixed IP address? The most sophisticated one part of our type of fraud is click spamming and preloading. What happens here is that people are hoping for the random chance of someone who is actually an organic user to be attributed to a click spam or preload. So what happens, a preload is, many networks are using preloads in order to make the user experience better, in order to preload the ad, in order to not have the user waiting to see the ad. When they preload this app, a click is triggered, and by the click, the attribution provider is getting a fingerprint. So what these people who are actually doing this preload or click spam and the users who are playing a game don't even see the ad. They are hoping for this user to be going to the App Store, download an app, and then we, as the attribution provider, if we don't have this filter in place, we would attribute this organic install to a fraudulent source. And that's the worst that can happen, because first of all, you're paying for an install which is actually organic. And second of all, the organic users are the ones that are most valuable for most apps. And you think, okay, this source is actually really good. I want to optimize my marketing spend on this particular source, which is, as we, without a system like this, don't know, a fraudulent install. So this is something that you really need to look after. Again, just to reiterate, because it's so important, organic users are being poached. You're paying for organic users if you're not having any system in place. And then what do we do about the solution? You limit the number of clicks considered for fingerprinting from a single IP address. This is a system which is in place, or should be in place, for attribution providers, which will automatically help you to reject those installs, to reject them from attributing to a source, to let them still happen, but not rejecting them and not paying them, or you guys shouldn't pay for them. But looking at, once again, the actual outcome of fraud, I think what many people think, it's only about, we are only losing some of our budget from fraud. And it could be up to 10%, up to 20, 30, 40%. This is not the worst that can happen, because some people even accept fraud because it will still count as an install, which will give you an uplift in the rankings, which will give you, once again, an uplift in organic downloads. But there's much more. So if you have a fraud prevention system in place, make sure that it's actually preventing and not only detecting, because there's a big difference in before and after the fact. There are some services out there that are helping you to detect the fraud, but then it's already happened. Then you would have to go back to the networks and claim the money back, which never really happens. With a prevention system in place, this is really what you want to have, because the attribution provider then will be able to reject or tell you this was an organic install. But again, it's not only the money you lose, you are screwing your data set, and that's what you want to have clear and correct from the start, because the data is, you're paying an attribution provider or analytics provider to have the data on which you base your decisions to optimize your campaigns and to really make it better, get better users, right? So if you don't have a fraud prevention tool set activated, then you have wrong data and you're making wrong decisions on spending your money. We have one quote which I think is really relevant and really interesting. It's not only preventing fake installs from happening, but Rovio, for example, said that they are using the fraud prevention suite as an insurance. So now they don't have to be afraid on testing new networks. They will see if the networks are actually doing well, and they are not wasting any money. So I think this is a very interesting point of view. There's also in-app fraud, of course, and mainly for gaming, I would say, but this is where in-app purchase fraud happens, when users hack apps and fool the app into thinking that they paid for the goods when they actually didn't, which is another worst case in the kind of topic of fraud. And the fraud prevention SDK will will make it happen to have not fraud in there anymore. If you see it, if you see this number, and I think this is horrific, and most of you won't probably believe it, but for Android, 96% of all in-app purchases are hacked, are fraud. And this, I mean, this will screw your data. At the end of the day, you will know how much money you have on your bank account, because yeah, you will get the money, but Also, you want to have your attribution provider's data correct in order to make your decisions, to get the users that are actually not making fraudulent installs. The second point of our mobile measurement 2.0, first one was fraud, fighting fraud, preventing fraud. The second one is really personalization. And what does that really mean? It means, first of all, to deliver the right message at the right time to the right user. And that is absolutely key. And your attribution providers, together with yourself, you're collecting tons and tons of data. And if you don't use this data to optimize your campaigns and your user acquisition, then I'm sorry to say that, but then you're doing something wrong. And this is something very new in the market. If we are hoping to get, we're spending, we all have budgets, we spend budgets, and we're hoping to get users to have a high retention rate. But the truth is something else. 95% of your apps are abandoned after the first month. 58% of your users will churn. 62% will use an app less than 11 times. And that's the big fear, right? It's always better and easier and cheaper to retain a user than getting a new one, at least a good one. So what we've recently launched is hourly data. We used to aggregate the data and always say, okay, Friday was a good day, Monday was a bad day, Wednesday was a bad day. But what does it really mean? We now, or there's now the opportunity to look at hourly data, like hourly trends, and you can now say Friday morning was good, but Friday evening was bad. When did my most valuable users actually download the app? And that's something very new, and this is exactly where you can leverage the data in order to deliver the right message at the right time to the right user. The second part of the personalization and engagement is the segmentation, really. Once again, you have a lot of data. You might have it in your backend somewhere, but you're not using it. With this tool, Segmentation, you can now download segments out of all segments, out of all groups, out of all users, and make very tiny particular segments, which you can give out to networks, with a dynamic link where the network clicks a link, downloads all of the users that they are supposed to be targeting, and you're then able to deliver very customized, very personal messages to these particular users. You will definitely reach more prospects. You can also make an exclusion targeting. That means I have, let's say, 100,000 users, 80,000 are not coming back again, and I've tried actually to getting that back. But you're wasting a lot of money, a lot of ad space on that. So you can actually now say, these 80,000 users, I don't want to see any of my ads anymore. And the other 20,000 users, I make 10 groups, for example, of 2,000 users each, which have a common trait, which are interested, let's say, if we're talking about food delivery, in pizza. Some are interested in sushi, some are interested in soups. So you can make different messages, different creatives that will definitely speak a little bit better and a little bit more customized to your user base. You're actually able to change the user behavior because the users will feel like they don't annoy me, they don't spam me with a message, they actually deliver stuff that I like. So when you go to your attribution provider, to the Adjust dashboard, for example, you will be able to simply select your user base. You are able to narrow it down to particular sushi, pizza, soup lovers. You're selecting the OS type, the device type, anything that you want. You can say, I want to have users that have spent maybe $10, maybe $15 in my app. I want to have users that like the whales that are continuously spending money in my app. And you can download the list, send it to the networks, and these networks then particularly only have the ability and the only job to do is to target this particular group of users, which will, I think, revolutionize a little bit the UA, because you now have very, very hard-coded groups of groups that are users that you're supposed to be targeting. So The other benefit of this kind of stuff is that you don't have to share all your data with networks. Now you can only share the data that you actually want to share. And I think the older the industry gets, the more we look into the future, the more data will happen, and the less you want to share because it gets more and more competitive. You lose the lack of control. You're now in control. You're now actually in control of what you're sharing. You're not spamming your users anymore, and you're avoiding human error. Let me show you just this little video.
Take a second to imagine. Every little piece of mobile user data you've collected, every bit of information you've shared with partners. Where is that now? Rather than passing on all that data, picture a better way. Have the flexibility to define and segment beforehand. Give your team the tools to make more informed decisions. And connect with your customers with greater accuracy. All with complete control over the data you share. With Adjust's Audience Builder, always send the right message at the right time, without the need to share all your secrets. And share only the things that are absolutely necessary.
So for us and for the people in the mobile marketing industry, the people that buy downloads, for us it's really about accurate data and personalized communication. And I hope that it got a little bit clear of what we mean by that. I'm happy to answer any questions right now. My colleague Leonid is also here in the blue shirt over there. Yeah, do you have any questions right now? So it's all clear. Wow, that's nice. Well, anyway, thank you for listening. And yeah, we are here to answer questions afterwards or just chat about different kinds of products. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fabian.